Simonelli and her new book, which has both a beautiful color and a beautiful name, the Circulatio. I've known Dr. Simonelli for, many, many years. We've been colleagues and worked together in a number of settings, and we've been friends as well. And I feel like I've been with you a lot through this book and this development of the book. So much of it, I know a lot of the bits and pieces, but it was really exciting for me to actually get the whole thing and to read it through. And it way exceeded my expectations. So I'm very excited to share this conversation with you and have you talk about the book. And let me turn it over to you. And I would love to hear just kind of what's the book about? Let's start there.
Oh my goodness, that's a big question. Maybe well, the subtitle of the book I think is important. We spent a lot of time trying to come up with this, and every word was debated. So the full title of the book is The Circulatio, a spiraling process to get unstuck and cultivate your authentic being in life and practice. And that really, our hope is that captures what the work is about. It really is an invitation into a deeper dive for the reader. It's written certainly for a therapeutic audience, for psychotherapists, analysts, psychologists, for mental health, and also healthcare professionals. It's written for creative people, for people in like the theater or educators. It's written for coaches and um, people in leadership roles. I think the work actually really lends itself to people working with teams of people because the work is rooted in group work. So interestingly, although it is group work that the book speaks about, um, it also lends itself to your own personal exploration, which is how it's written. So in the book, you'll find at least 12 practices that you can dive into for your own exploration. It's really written for the individual reader to go more deeply into their own experience. I'm a firm believer in experiential work. So I really wanted to write the book so that it was engaging in an experiential way. And that if you do work with people, then these practices are things that you could use in your own scope of practice. So that feels really important to me. In terms of what the book is also about is that one of the things that I did so that it wouldn't just be my voice speaking to you, which I know is endlessly fascinating, but not really. What I did want to do is get the voice of people who have done this group work with me
Mm.
for years. So I interviewed 10 people who have worked with me in this group work anywhere from 3 years to 14 years. And we did 1 hour interviews on Zoom, and I used those transcripts, and then I worked with those transcripts to distill brief vignettes and then also collective themes that came out of those interviews. And those are presented in 2 different chapters. And then throughout the book, elements of what those co-researchers have to say are woven throughout the book. And I really asked them one guiding question, and that was, what was their lived experience with this work while they were doing it, and now that they've got some distance from the work and are living their lives based on whatever the impact of the work was for them. So that's woven throughout the book. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
And
That's
there's
a great overview of it. Yeah, go ahead.
well, there's also the myth of Inanna that's woven throughout
Mm.
the book. Inanna is an ancient Sumerian myth that predates the Christ myth. It's about a 4,000-year-old myth, and it part of this way of working is it's kind of a Jungian orientation. This way of working really looks at psyche and soul. So we're wanting to dive more deeply into the body and into psyche and in the stories and images that come up through this way of working. And so a companion myth is a beautiful way to companion us in that journey. And so the myth of Inanna is about going in, she's the goddess of the upper world, and it's about her journey into the underworld and her death, and then her ascension through coming back through the gates of the underworld and reclaiming aspects of herself, and embodying a more matured um, self as she comes back up to the upper world. And that's actually the reason I chose that myth, is because that's a real theme that emerged in these interviews that I did with my 10 co-researchers
Mhm.
in their process of doing this work, was that it was really a spiraling process of their own deepening and maturing. And so it felt like the perfect imaginal companioning myth to help kind of use those archetypal images that
Mhm.
are writ large, that help us identify our own personal stories in a bigger way. So that myth is woven throughout as well.
Now, there's so much of what you're saying that I want to talk more about and illuminate. And I just want to throw in that you mentioned in your book that your work had been with women,
Mm-hmm.
and but you've also worked extensively with men. I know that about you. It just, as you mentioned, the women were the ones that chose to do the longer term work with you at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And Anana is also a myth about a woman. I think it's really important, though, to say that these are larger themes that apply to all of us, to men, to women, and to any kind of self-transformational work. So just I want to just put a pin in that, that it's not just for women, this book, and for everyone to know that. And I think there are so many men, at least in my experience, the work I do, that are really wanting to come to consciousness and to do this transformation. And secondly, I think really vital thing about the Anana journey, which I resonate with a lot, is that it was a conscious, voluntary decision of hers to do the descent. There was nothing wrong with her life. In fact, she was queen of heaven.
Right. Life is
She,
good.
so it's, I think one of the most important things about that myth is that that conscious decision is probably one that we all need to make.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I love the way you used it in the book for that. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great points. And
yeah.
yeah, the yes, to everything that you said. And really, as I've written this book, I've really been very mindful about the fact that although initially the group work, the decision was made, it wasn't a happenstance situation. The decision was made to offer the work to women because they were the ones that were initially saying yes. Um, but one of the examples that I use some case studies in the back of the book that are examples of the work in action. And one of those examples is a mixed group of men and women. Um,
Mm,
it's a 2 hour experience, and I explain what we did, what those experiences
right.
were that people had, and their reporting of what those experiences were. And that was an example of men and women. Um, and so the work obviously lends itself to everybody. And as I move forward, if there are offerings in the future, I'm really imagining making those available to everybody, because I do feel
Mm,
that um, I feel like even in the decade since, this work was really in full swing with women saying yes, and now I think things have changed quite a bit,
mhm.
post COVID, and with what's happening ecologically and politically and environmentally, and uh, there's just so much going on right now that I just feel that the contemporary pull of this work is, it's just so right on, because the work really supports people coming into a real embodied sense of their own conscious, grounded leadership, their own
Yeah.
authentic sense of self. And um, the world really needs that. And we all individually need that. And that's not exclusive to one gender or another, or one identity or another. That's something that um, I believe everybody is looking for, and places and spaces where people can express and discover and feel into and move into who they are and what they think and how they feel and what those images are that are coming up and out through body and psyche. And that's what this work offers. And so I think that's the pull for that is even more alive now in this moment in time. So good point
Yeah.
that men
I,
make.
I'm really smiling because, well, first off, I completely agree with you, and it's not just something that either you or I are thinking. It's just obvious. And here's the question that some people might want to know or not understand is why? Why do we need it? Why do we need this self exploration and getting to authenticity?
Yeah, why bother?
Yeah, essentially, yeah, because
Why
it's
bother?
I mean, Anana went through a lot of work, all that she had to give up to get down to roll around in her own shadow. Why would we do that?
Mhm. Yeah,
What?
why bother? Well, you work in your own way with these exact kinds of themes, through the work
Yeah.
that you do in the world. And I think there's a tremendous overlap in how I would answer this and how you would answer this. And that is that as we grow through life, we all have patterned ways of being. And those patterns are informed by our early life, by our childhood, and they become our psychology. They become how we navigate life. And those patterned ways of being are informed by our trauma, they're informed by our sense of self, our belief systems, and those patterned ways of being are often very limiting. And they become oftentimes feel more and more restrictive as we grow into our life. And
Mm.
uh, most of the people that I work with, even in my private practice, are feeling that they're in a crisis of identity or a crisis of meaning or feeling very lost. And it's usually based on outgrowing a need to outgrow those old patterns and those old ways of being. And so this work, although it's challenging, whether it's personal psychotherapeutic work or whether it's this group work, the circulatio work, it's really work of facing the things that limit us, facing the things that keep us stuck and keep us small, and finding more room to move, more breathing space, more inspiration and awareness around who we are. And that is like our soul call, the voice of our psyche, the images and stories that are wanting to come to the surface so that we have a better understanding of
Mm.
who we are
Mm.
and what the pull is that's pulling us forward in our life, like why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing, what our purpose is, what our contribution is, and how we can be who we're meant to be so that we can contribute to the world in a way that is meaningful to us, not in a way of what we think we should be doing or what other people tell us we should be doing.
Well, I mean, that's a big ask. And in a world where we're really taught that to succeed, you follow some preset rules that are somewhat unspoken, but it has to do with the only thing that matters is being successful.
And I think that's
And
what's killing people.
that is what's killing people. And yes, I see that all the time. And it's in a really sort of cliched way that we talk about midlife crises that it mostly has been attributed to men. And I have a whole theory about why it's men and not women, because I think women have them too, but it shows up differently. I think that what I'm seeing, and you're probably seeing, I'm going to guess you're seeing as well, is that it's a misunderstanding of that. It's an awakening. It's when people recognize that through all that they've done, all the laboring and the following the rules and all that, that they're not happy.
Correct.
And that isn't happiness is not some frivolous pursuit that comes from finding pleasure. I mean, I'm stating the obvious here, but it really is more like a sort of just a full embodied sense of being in your own skin and happy with who you are. And so one of the things that really struck me as I read your book, this time especially, is how many times you use the word hunting and hunting for, which I think is a fabulous and very evocative and
Mm.
very active way to talk about awareness. So, will you say a little more about that? Why
Sure,
you use that word? Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I think it's a great question because it kind of forces me to pause and ponder. It, it's a very somatic word, actually. It's a very
it is.
enlivening word. It's a body-based word that and an imaginal, evocative word that is perfect, right? I think for what it is I'm inviting people into doing. And it's a word I use while I'm facilitating groups of people. So imagine we have the music playing and um, people are in some kind of a moving experience. And um, the music is not super active. It's sort of a
Mm,
evocative music and people are moving and I am seeding little prompts and inviting them to um, hunt for the awareness that's coming up. What are you aware of right now? And hunting for what's happening in the body. What are you aware of in emotion? Hunting, what's just on the edge of awareness? So there's when you're just imagine like you're out in the forest and you're hunting, what are you doing? All your senses are right. You don't know what you're going to find. You're curious, you're piqued, everything is sort of open and awake and like all of you is listening. It's not just cognitive or it's like there's a primal sense about that term. It awakens a full sense of look searching for
mhm.
what's calling you, what's wanting to be known, what's wanting to be or what's waiting to be found. So that's a great question.
Well, thank you. Just to carry that, because what you're saying is so evocative, and just to carry that a little further, um, in that hunt, you mentioned what's waiting to be found. There's also what doesn't want to be found,
Mm.
but needs to be, right? That um, then if we get in, you mentioned Carl Jung, and he talks about the shadow, and the shadow is where we stuff away what we believe are unwanted parts of ourselves. So that's what I'm kind of getting at is there's parts of ourselves that want to stay hidden for protection, just psychological, emotional protection. So the hunting, I just love that because it is so active. Like you really are also going after what isn't obvious, what doesn't want to be found, what might be painful, what might be scary to be found. I
Mm.
mean, you might be thinking you're going to pick up a rock hoping to find something, and what you find is a rattlesnake, and then, but still being willing to do it. Um, I think one of the things that's so important about your book is that it's not for the really the faint of heart. It really is and the work you do is such a deep journey, a journey of discovery, but you've got to be courageous. And in fact, you get more courageous as you
That's
do
what I
it, but you
was
got
going
to
to
kind of
say.
start there, right?
That's what I was going to say. The work, it's so wonderful because the work, and this was something that I became very present to as I was doing these interviews, is how much courage my
Yeah.
co-researchers reported was cultivated in them through the process of doing the work. And that was such a great articulation for me to hear, like
Hmm.
I knew that to a certain extent, but to have them really talk about that, um, how much stronger people became, how much more courageous people became, how much more um, willing to do the difficult things people became. And a lot of that um, is related to the fact that people develop a more embodied, centered sense of self that goes with them. It's like a moving,
Yeah.
centered sense of gravity, like centered in my own gravity. that is sustaining, that
Hmm.
is a home base that comes with me. So now I can be more courageous. I can take more risks because I know that I've got myself, I've got my own back. And that's not a lesson that I teach. That's something that grows through the practice of doing the work and is supported by the context of cultivating a strong ritualized safe space for people to drop into doing their work. It's cultivated by a number of things, but
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
cultivated by this way of working, this sort of what I refer to as like a pedagogy. It's there's all these
Hmm.
things that come together to create this holding space. I'm doing this holding space for people to become more courageous, and the courage is what facilitates deeper discovery and more power in their own becoming.
Yeah, absolutely. It strikes me also that it's such a important practice for then living life. So then
Absolutely, and
you go
interacting.
out there and now you're outside of the more safe environment of the group work, which I want to say more about in a second, how important group work is. You're out living your life, but you have bodily experiences of courage and resilience,
Mhm.
right? And it has everything to do with how you're going to face life that we can't control most of it, even if we think we can, but we can meet it and respond from a place of resilience. So let's go back to group work because there's so much research about group work. I know you know that, you talk about it. I know it well, that it's the group work and it's also the facilitator or facilitators that set this, what we call a container. What we're really doing is establishing boundaries of safety.
Mhm.
And much as you would do, it makes me think sometimes about when you have a toddler, you have really tight boundaries for safety. As they get older, those can expand and expand till finally, you become a teenager. You can't really keep them all that safe anyway. But hopefully, in the years that they were in that younger space, that they learned their own resilience. They learned to not just be strong and courageous, but to recognize healthy fear.
Mhm.
Because I know a lot of people that do your work, a lot of people, because I know this, have had their fear trained out of them
Mhm.
because of trauma and abuse. They learned, what are you afraid of? This is just how life is, whatever. But learning to have discernment and resilience. So the group work, if done right, and I think that's an important piece, and I'd like you to talk about how the group work you do is creates the safety that people need.
Oh, well, I mean, there's standard sort of practices for group work in terms of making agreements and
Mm-hmm.
having,
Mm-hmm.
there's all sorts of agreements, and this is all outlined in the book, and this is standard group
Mm-hmm.
practice. Um, I think what some of the deeper things that happen, um, there's really a commitment to and a demonstrated experience of non-pathologizing behavior
Right.
and like so a real breadth of tolerance for people's behavior and what comes up while they're having their experience in the group. Um, and so non-judgment, non-pathologizing,
Mm-hmm.
non-projecting. So I'm not making up stories about them.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all sort of guidelines that come out of the practice of authentic movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that I write about. It's one of the practices that we use in this work. Um, and it's something that I use as a modality. So I also teach participants how to witness and echo movements back to each other. So there's situations that I set up in movement practice where participants are um, feeding each other back. They're movements they're witnessing and then echoing, holding the movement for the initial mover. They're holding that movement for the mover and then echoing it back to them so that this mover who initiated the movement now can see their movement held by someone else. And
Mm.
so this offers this profound sense of being seen without words. There's no conversation. It's just this somatic psychological experience of being seen and gotten somehow. And it awakens this deep sense of compassion. So,
Mm.
compassion for self, compassion for the other. There's this co-experience of compassion, and then it starts to really build this sense of group. And so that is part, that's one of a number of things, but that's part of what really is sort of like a powerful ally in the process of creating group space. And that's not something I would do right at the beginning of a group. That's something that happens as a group starts to develop more connection with each other. But that's an example of something that would be
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
involved in deepening a group that's very body based. Yeah, I'm thinking of something one of my co-researchers, one of the women I interviewed, said to me. She said, it's going to be very interesting to see how you write a book about something that has so few words. We don't talk about so much of what we do because we're having the experience of it. It's going to be really interesting to see how you actually write a book about it. And it turns out she was right because, I mean, I wrote a book about it.
Mm.
And there's lots of words to articulate it, but so much of what happens in the group experience is tacit, and um, it's a lived experience, it's a felt sense, it's imagery, and it's movement, and it's structured, but it's something that's felt in the room. It's a palpable experience of being together and deepening.
Well, I certainly appreciate the question of how you're going to write a book about something that's non-somatic, but a couple of things about that. One is you did it very well
Thank you.
because what you did was both you described what goes on in groups, you gave people practices to do, you used words to describe what the practice is, and the practices are not intellectually based particularly. Um, and you also did a really lovely job of bringing in research,
Mm,
really current research about what's going on in the body, how our body uses imagination and movement to go deeper and to heal. You and some of the research in there was very new to me. Um, Not to say that I totally keep up on research, but I do pretty much, and certainly around these topics. So I just want to make that point that it's fascinating, the research that you did bring in. Your references to neuroscience, to biology, to zoology, to psychology, philosophy, all of that nicely woven in, not to be over academic to the point of I would find it a little distracting. So you did a good job of that. And I think that it's not an easy thing to do. Also, um, I think it's also important to note that although it's definitely any psychotherapist could get a lot out of it, I think the work you do and I think the way the book talks about the work could be very valuable to anybody in the creative field
thank
for
you.
them to maybe understand what maybe they know on some level,
Mm-hmm.
but to be able to deepen their and why it's important that they do that they hunt and deepen their own knowledge of their own authenticity. Because I would imagine you've worked with some artists, dancers, movers. What do they say about your work and about the book,
Mm-hmm. Well, there
about
were
how it's
two of
supportive?
the people that I interviewed were creative people in, I mean, specifically, like it's their line of work. They both work in theater, and they have taken the work and used it in the work that they do, and feel that it was been very applicable to their teaching and to their like one woman is a dialogue, teacher of like dialectic work, like how to have
Hmm.
accents and things like that. And so she uses the body warm up things in her work, and how to kind of go into the imaginal mindset of what it would be like to be this kind of a person or that kind of a person. And also freeing the tongue and the throat and the mouth and all these different things she has applied. So I don't know about that specifically, but she's used a lot of the ways that I work and applies them to her way of working. And then another woman who does like choreography for fight scenes, and also intimacy. She sets up situations, scenes for like intimacy for plays. And so
Hmm.
she uses a lot of the work that she's experienced through, she's a trained in this way of working, and she uses it in her work in theater to create safe space for when she's offering a class or things like that. So
Hmm. Hmm.
um, I'm going to bring this in. This is kind of my own personal love affair with the film Hamnet. And
Hmm.
I saw a director's cut, and I watched the director's cut. And they did there was a short little snippet of them dancing after one of the very intense scenes, and
Mm.
to kind of release energy. It was just, for
Yeah.
releasing the energy. And then I saw the director speaking about it, and how there is an energetic frequency that she works to create within a group of within her cast, and how when people are able to move through the emotions of a difficult scene and then shift it through dancing to move the energy to a new level, that it builds a sense of connection in that cast, and it creates a new connection and a new vibration
Yeah.
between the group. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about vibration, I'm talking about connection, I'm talking about
Yeah.
frequency. And so um, those kinds of things, which are behind the scenes, translate into the power of the film, um, because there's something palpable, at least for me as someone who viewed that film, there's something very alive in that film that's palpable and somatic and rich and imaginal. And as a viewer of that film, I think the way that she approached it with all of these other elements translates. And that's a great example of how this
Hmm.
applies to the creative world. So there's resonance there.
That's a great example. And I would concur about that film in particular. And I'm thinking about when I've watched films where they seem very two-dimensional. Like I'm aware the characters aren't that into it, though the characters in that film were so deeply connected to themselves
Yeah.
first. And it's interesting to hear that that's how she does it. So I think, the other thing that really struck me about this book all along is that there are art therapists, there's dance therapists, there's music therapists, there's psychotherapists, there's a whole range, there's somatic therapists now, and a lot of focus these days on somatic work.
Mhm.
And then a whole nother school that's all talk therapy. There's a way in which you synthesize all that, and you've talked today about all that goes on that's nonverbal. And I also know there is some verbal processing, some verbal sharing you do with the work that you talk about in the book, because ultimately it seems that what pulls it all together is people's ability to speak about themselves, what's really going on. So many people have grown up learning not to speak what's true for them. So I just give a moment to, where does talk therapy come into this for you?
Yeah, that's really a great question. Because I'm really glad you asked that, because
Mm.
my sense is that if you're just having experiences, you can become sort of an experience junkie,
Mhm.
where you're pursuing this experience and that experience and this experience. And unless the experience is anchored into some sense of meaning making, what does this mean? how is this relevant to me? How does this relate to who I am, or what my next steps are, or where my challenges are, or how this is guiding me towards what I need to look at more deeply. It's just an experience, and so that's lovely, but so what, so much of the work, and there are layers to the ways in which we can come to meaning making in the work. um, so meaning making in and of itself is part of what you're talking about. And so meaning making, one of the ways is to bring the movement work into art. So art can provide an anchoring and a way of making meaning. What is that helps to sort of gather and collect and put an image to things. Another layer of meaning making is reflective writing. There's all sorts of research that talks about even brief writing experiences or time offer a way to bring meaning. Sometimes those reflective writing experiences are focused, where I might ask a guiding question that would target people's exploration around something that would be more specific. Sometimes the writing is just, jot down a few thoughts that come to you that relate to what we've just done, that stand out as important to you. Um, and then another step of meaning making is that you might share in dyads or triads, small groups where you would share your art or your reflection of writing or just your movement experience. So another layer of meaning making. How do I mull this over with a small group of people? And then there's another layer of meaning making where we sit in circle together, a larger circle of people, and we distill some of that meaning making. So we're not going into long drawn out stories, but we are doing sort of a distillation of, wow, as I've gone through these various stages and steps of meaning making, here's the nugget. Here's the takeaway. Here's what I'm learning. Here's what's coming into focus. Here's some next steps. Here's what I need to look at more deeply. Here's what I'm going to practice when I go home. So those are examples of how that distillation of meaning making, a good portion of which is talking, because that helps right brain, left brain, cross brain processing happening, helps people to distill something that's going to be useful as they move from the circle to their home life, which is one of the steps. There's 5 spirals that take people through a process, and the last step in that process is mastery, which is, how am I going to move this into my everyday life? So yeah, there's definitely a place for talk and reflection and letting that anchor in awareness beyond just the experience.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up that part about the mastery step. Um, I think it's something that is missing often when
Mm,
people go and have deep, profound peak experiences in all kinds of ways that they do it.
mhm,
And I think there's some learning that happens there. But the real mastery comes in the practicing in your everyday life. So it's sort of like life can be a practice of becoming more authentic and of hunting to really listen. One of the things I hunt for is to listen to my authentic voice versus that inner voice that's just kind of telling me the same old stories or trying to keep me from changing and so forth. So I hunt for that
mhm,
inner voice. And it I just keep coming back to that hunting because what you're on about is this is an active process. It's an active process, and you wrote about it so well in the book. And I think even just reading the book, people are going to get a sense that this is something that you have to decide to do, like Anana, and then you got to follow through because you're going to get to. I mean, I think often people get to a place after they've committed to do some personal work where it's just too hard.
mm,
The pull to stay the same is very strong. And
mhm.
I think from what I'm reading and what I've seen you do is that the movement shakes that up.
Yeah.
Actually, using body movement will get you past mental blocks,
Mhm,
to use a creative term.
mhm.
Just literally moving your body.
Yeah, free form. There's three kinds of movement, and one of them is authentic movement, which I referred to earlier. But free form expressive movement is one of those movements, and it just, moving the body and, music that shakes things up and some gentle facilitation about getting your body moving and moving into space in different ways and moving around other bodies in different ways. And then that becomes the focus. And pretty soon, you're not as stuck as you were when you started. So that's
Yeah.
cool.
And
Um,
that reminds me that one of the things that you have done is become a DJ.
yes, I have.
So I
It
know
always
how
makes me
important
laugh.
music is. Yeah, I mean it is. It's just it's so lighthearted in a way, but the music
Mhm.
part of all the work you do is so important,
Yeah,
right? I
it
mean,
really
the
is.
music's huge. So maybe say just a little bit about that. Why'd you decide to become a DJ, and a little bit about the importance of the music? We're
Yeah,
not just talking about any music.
yeah, no, no, the music is very specific. And I think probably I mean, I've been a dancer my whole life, so that's important to note. So I've loved music my whole life. My family, I grew up in a family that always had music playing. I come from a musical family. And so that's always been a thread. But I think really becoming more having more understanding about music and becoming more strategic and
Mm.
masterful with music started with my breathwork training. So that was 30
Mm.
years ago or so. Um, and developing musical journeys, like how to use music to take people into a journey, that started with my breathwork training. And the form of breathwork was psychospiritual integrative breathwork, which was an off growth of holotropic breathwork. So that was like
Yeah.
2 hour journeys minimum of music that would take people into these deep places, transformational holotropic places. And so from that, then I started doing other forms of dance training that begged for these musical journeys to support people in exploring different ways of moving and different textures and terrains of music and movement. Um, and then came here to Salt Lake and I was doing that and creating these dance experiences for people as part of that dancing experience. And then got connected with the growing ecstatic dance community here. And they really encouraged me to DJ because I already knew how to create all these
Yeah.
musical journeys and was starting to do my dance workshops and things like that. And they're like, all that's missing is like knowing how to use the hardware and creating a journey for ecstatic dance. And so I reluctantly got nudged into doing this and I love it. It's so fun. And so I can pretty confidently say that I'm certainly the oldest local DJ and I'm amongst the oldest DJs that ever rotate through our communities.
Good for you.
My music is
Yeah.
hip, so
There you are. There it is. Let's have a shout out for aging well and happily and resiliently and joyfully. Yeah.
well, and there's
Yeah.
lots of research now that's out. You can see it on Instagram that tells you that,
Yeah.
if you're moving and loving music and keeping your body moving, it's a great anti-ager. So
Yes, absolutely. It's
person.
something that it's hard to, and it's so easy to do.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
so if you just let yourself, and all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
So
it's so it's a great way for me to um be in a community that I'm not facilitating generally and I can give back, so I really love
yeah.
that. I get to create a musical experience for people and I do occasionally a tiny bit of um, facilitation or offering little prompts, which is not what DJs do, but I do. So I offer some little prompts and people seem to like it. And it's a chance for me to kind of give back a little bit. So I enjoy that. And then in general, I'm dancing with my ecstatic dance community, which I really like. And it's a place to go every week, sometimes twice a week, where I get to move and I'm not facilitating anything. I just get to go and do my own thing. So that's really a blessing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Something I know is that the world is hungry for people who, like you, are happy, resilient, and they want it. They want it. And what you're offering is people can have happy, resilient lives. It's really possible. And that sounds so simple in a way to just say it like that. But at the bottom, that's what everyone's, and it is actually attainable. Takes a little work.
Mhm.
Takes a little work. There's a quote in your book that I plan to use. I will give you credit for, of course. Some things I do. Can I read it? It's
Sure,
just one
sure.
long
And then I want
sentence.
to read a tiny bit too.
Yeah, that'd be great. That's what I was going to segue into. So here's the one that I will find myself using. To face the hard stuff,
Mm.
to inhabit your body, to remember your imagination, to reclaim your creativity and courage, and to follow your direct experience into your own authentic being. There it is. That's how to live.
Mm.
So thank you for that. And yes, I would love for you to read a piece that you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I feel touched by that. Thanks for reading
Mm,
that.
very touching. Yeah, me too.
Well, and I have to say, and this is I say little bits of this to my granddaughter as well, who I dedicated the book to. She only knows me now. And
Right.
people that are, watching this know me now. And so, but you've known me a long time, and you know that, there have been a lot of challenges, and there have been a lot of struggles, and there have been a lot of things to have to work through and to have to face. And so,
Yeah.
it's not been, I've not always been super happy. There have been things to work
Mm.
through, and that's true for all of us. And so, um, it's worth the work.
It's worth it. And it's not dependent on external circumstances entirely. And I say entirely because, yeah, to some extent, life can be harder or easier. But finding your authenticity and loving yourself and having self compassion is something we do have agency over.
Yes, we do. So, I wanted to read a little bit. This is in chapter 1, and this is about the word, the title,
Mm,
which is worth talking about. Um, so let's begin. So I'm reading now. Let's begin with the etymology and image of the central word in the title, the feeling of it, circulatio, Latin for circulatory, circulation, circulating, or circular. Blood circulating brings oxygen, nourishment, and life to the body. The circulatio, an alchemical term, conjures images of multiple passes, cleansing the fluid in an alchemist's flask, swirling around and around. This process of clarifying over time separates what is no longer needed from what is most precious and life giving. Psychologically, circulatio suggests facing, even consuming and alchemizing less desirable parts of self, identifying patterns and complexes held in the body, mind, emotions, and spirit, then moving through multiple passes in a trustworthy holding space until greater awareness comes and more generative aspects are cultivated. The curative nature of the circulatio pattern refines and brings generative energy as the process works consciously with and through the body, offering more space to breathe, more room to move, more light into dark places, inviting greater consciousness, vision, and enlivenment. Navigating the sections and chapters of this book will build your understanding. Doing the practices will cultivate a felt sense and an imaginal conversation, and soon you will dip into the lived experience of this way of working. This process has grown from my own pursuit of interests, organically following what called me from one interest to the next, with the organizing principle of growth, healing, and transformation towards true self-expression. This, I can now see in hindsight, feels like confirmation that we have a holographic aspect within each of us,
Mm.
one that grows our wholeness and calls us to bring its expression into form. It is the process of getting unstuck, facing the patterns of grief, guilt, and trusting our own permission and audacity to take up space in our own unique ways. This is the work of this work. Ultimately, it is the work of maturing into an individuated life, gathering around one's unique internal organization and autonomy that leads to the unique expression of you.
Oh, that's lovely. That's very moving.
Mm,
It really touches me deeply. And I think that that last bit about the maturation,
mm,
and maturation comes from really facing the hard stuff about your own life, about your childhood, really letting go by forgiving and taking responsibility. I'm reminded of that thing people say that you're not responsible for what happened to you in childhood, but you are responsible for healing it,
mm.
for letting it go, for maturing and facing. And it's really well said in that, just in the thing you just read. Very moving.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering, is there anything you'd like people to know? Just right now, you have an audience, you want people to know.
Mm, that change is possible.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And that
beautiful.
actually, that I think the book really makes a point, that it really is about life. The book makes a point that we have a biological imperative to grow into our own unique expression, and that is about our authentic individuation and growing into who we're meant to be. And that was not an intention in writing this book. It was something that emerged. It is a
Mm,
voice that came through the writing of the book. Um, and that is the central organizing feature of the book and the work. And I didn't set out to make that the case. That's what emerged.
mhm. Oh, really beautifully said. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share all this with me. It's been wonderful and enlivening.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much
And
for
I
interviewing.
hope that many people read it and get the gift that you're offering.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be sharing this.